All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for coming to our session. I'm Julie Poole, as Jessica said, Director of Product Operations. I've been at Ensemble since 2023 and was actually introduced to Pendo prior to that. So when I joined Ensemble, our Chief Product Officer was really interested and excited to learn what Pendo could do for our employees. So I'm really happy to be here and share that experience with you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Allison Hopkins, and I'm a lead product manager at Ensemble. I was part of our early adopter team that helped deploy Pendo at Ensemble. So Julie asked me to come here today to give that product manager perspective and walk through some of the problems we were having as a product org and how Julie and the product ops team helped us use Pendo to solve those problems. So today we're really excited to share our experiences and the success that we've had with Pendo. Like I said, Julie and the product ops team was really responsible for leading the charge with Pendo, getting it deployed at Ensemble, and then we as the product managers were responsible for diving into our individual workflows and use cases to make sure that we were leveraging Pendo in the best possible way. Before we get started, I'm going to do a quick intro into Ensemble and what it is that we do, providing some context for the use cases that we're going to be talking about later. So Ensemble is a healthcare revenue cycle management company. In case you're wondering what revenue cycle management, or RCM, is, it's the entire financial patient process from start to finish in healthcare. So if you think about your own patient journeys, you guys have probably interacted with RCM. It's everything from patient registration, obtaining prior authorizations, insurance billing, getting payments from patients, basically everything that is needed to make sure that providers get paid for their services. So to deliver on our value, we start with data ingestion. Like I said, I'm on the data integrations team. So we ingest and standardize massive amounts of data from vendors, payers, and providers, creating an enterprise data lake. We also then work on workflow and automation. So as the examples I gave with RCM, it encompasses the entire patient journey through the healthcare system. We, on the RCM side, find ways to automate all the things that are needed to make sure providers get paid, and we're looking for ways to do that using predictive analytics, rules engines, things like that. Lastly, we leverage business intelligence. So we provide all of our clients, our health systems, with real-time monitoring and dashboards, so that way they have visibility into our performance metrics and insights. So that's just a little quick about what we do at Ensemble. I'm sure you guys have all experienced this on your own patient journeys.
So as we gain a new client or we partner with a new client, all of those associates who are part of those revenue cycle departments actually become Ensemble employees. So this is a big transition for them. Obviously, it's similar to an acquisition in that you're changing their payroll, their benefits, you're trying to bring them on from a cultural perspective. So our HR teams and our operations teams really focus on that. But the other aspect of it is that we are changing their workflows as soon as from Friday they were working at one company and Monday they're working at another company. They have the same job, but they have to do it differently. So we need applications that will help ease that transition and help provide them guidance so they can be effective in their same role, but within a new organization. We also have the same situation with commercial software, where we are rolling out new features or applications, and you have to do the same things with making sure they're adopting and utilizing, provide tooltips in that situation as well. So we want to make sure that applications are easy to use and that we're providing in-app guidance as necessary. The other thing I want to just mention is we have like 11,000 employees, so this is something that we really want to make sure we take into account on a regular basis. The other thing on our applications to make sure that you have a baseline before we actually jump into our content here today, is in a lot of situations we are taking very large spreadsheets, things that are manual processes, and putting them into an application. And this can also create a lot of friction for the employees because they had freedom to manipulate or do things within those more open tools that we are putting some constraints on because we want them to do things a specific way. So it's important for us to set that stage before we actually dive into like how we are improving that employee experience now. So we are leveraging usability studies in conjunction with Pendo to help provide that full feedback loop. And today we're going to show you our usability study framework and also some scenarios on how usability studies have informed us on what to do within Pendo and how Pendo has actually helped us inform us on things we need to take into account from a usability perspective. So let's get started. So how we like to think about it is a usability studies like observing someone in a brand new kitchen. They have the same ingredients, but they don't know where they're supposed to go. They don't know where their mixer is or maybe where their special pan is. So you're observing how they overcome these challenges in order to make the cake that they're trying to do. A usability study can occur anywhere in your development life cycle. It can be from a prototype, a mock-up, all the way to a developed application. The discipline here is to be an observer. And as product people, we like to be influencers. We want to make sure people are using the tool because we spent time designing it and developing it, that we want to drive them to the outcome that we want them to have. But in usability studies, you really have to sit back and just watch. You will have an opportunity to dive in to where the pain points are, but from the beginning, you just have to sit and watch. The end goal, obviously, is to build a better user experience in the end.
I know, as a product manager, I'm sure a lot of you other product managers can agree with this, that what Julie just talked about is so hard to do in practice. You see somebody going through an application differently than you envisioned it in your head when you were building it, and it's so hard to not jump in and be like, oh, why did you click that, or why didn't you go over there? So definitely a harder thing to do in practice. However, you might be asking yourself, well, what's the difference between user acceptance testing and a usability study? I know that was a question I had when we started doing both of these. So user acceptance testing, or UAT, is typically led by product, where usability studies are the responsibility of the UX team. So even though they're executed upon separately, and sometimes by different teams, they complement one another. Where UAT is really focusing on how is a product working? Is it working as we intended it to? During UAT, we're trying to validate that the product is meeting the specified acceptance criteria. We're also looking for any of those bugs or issues that we need to fix before go live. But it's really looking at, is the product doing what we intended, versus usability studies
is always driven by our UX team. And that's because they have that more unbiased opinion, I would also say, is because they're really just trying to observe those end users in their native environment, if you will. We conduct these studies to understand how they interact with a product before, during, and after their experience. And this involves observing them navigate and identifying where the pain points are. So let's talk about our framework that we're using today. And in this, we're going to walk through a scenario with one of our modules that we've recently brought to use, and that is our cash posting usability study. With the framework here, as we begin, it's really about setting the stage with your users who are going to be sitting in on the study. We want to make sure that they're very comfortable and confident and understand that it is a study. We are trying to refrain from using usability testing, because we don't want them to feel like it's a test. There isn't a right, there isn't a wrong way of doing something. This is just trying to see how intuitive the application really is. So setting expectations, grounding them on what this is all about is really the key thing for starting with the usability study.
So when we began this usability study for this specific module, our cash posting model, we listed a couple of tasks that the users needed to complete in the context of their daily workflow. We did not interject or interrupt. We let them complete the tasks without us saying anything. For this example, they were asked to complete tasks such as posting a payment or reconciling an account. After they were done with the task, we created a very simple rating scale and said, please tell us for each of the tasks how hard or easy it was to complete the task. That gave us an initial gauge into how intuitive is our tool. With no instruction, were they able to complete the tasks? Did they perceive it as easy or hard? So this first step of feedback was crucial. Then what we did was we dove deeper. So once they had finished completing all the tasks, we followed up with a list of questions to get some more detailed feedback from the users in our studies. So this is an example of two of the questions that we asked them. The first one was asking about a task we asked them to complete on our cash summary page. We said, do you know the difference between deposit total and posted total? They all said yes. We said, great, we did a great job. They knew what to do, we're good. However, in contrast, we asked them a question about a task that they were asked to complete on our cash variance page. We said, do you know the difference between add transaction and add payment, which are different steps in the process? They all said no. Now, that means if we mess up that part of the process in RCM, that means somebody's not getting paid. And I can tell you, I don't want to be the one to get the phone call to say that somebody's not getting their money. And it was because of our software that our associates didn't know how to complete the task. So clearly this identified a pain point in somewhere where we needed to give our users clear guidance or instructions on how to do this task. Well, luckily for us, we were in the process of creating a Pendo onboarding guide at the same time, so we knew that guide needed to address this issue.
That's right. So we used the findings from our usability study to make sure that we augmented our onboarding guide with very specific instructions on those details between add transaction and add payment to help provide that clarity for the end users. So this was our example of how usability study informed action for us to take within Pendo.
So now we want to take a look at the reverse. That last scenario was we did the usability study, we gathered information, we went into Pendo and made a change. Now let's flip that script. Let's say, where can Pendo tell me where there might be a problem or help me identify? In the beginning, I talked about all those different workflows within RCM that we cover. Trying to sit down and look and find problem and pain points across that is like finding a needle in a haystack. Like, I don't have time to sit there and dig through every single workflow and figure out where all those pain points are. But Pendo can help us do that. So in this next example, we're looking at a feature that we had already deployed. So it had passed UAT, said, yes, it's met its acceptance criteria. But then we asked the next question of, is this feature giving us the impact that we thought it would? So that's what we were trying to understand. So this feature was a simple thumbs up, or we added a simple thumbs up and thumbs down on a summary feature. This summary feature created a summary for our associates from multiple pages of notes. So we wanted our associates to tell us either yes or no, was that summary feature helpful for them?
So using Pendo, well, first of all, let me set a baseline of what our objective was. Our operations team said, hey, if our note summary is effective and helpful 75 to 80% of the time, then that's a win for us. That means our associates were able to process that account faster because they had a condensed version of everything that's occurred on that account for months and months and months. So that's a win. So the inverse of that obviously would be that it wasn't helpful 20 to 25% of that time. So that's what we were really interested in, is knowing when it wasn't helpful, because we know, do you always hit thumbs down, thumbs up? A lot of times you just bypass that. But we know if they hit thumbs down, there's a pain point there. So we built a Data Explorer report. I took the number of times they hit thumbs down compared to the number of times there was a note summary present in order to see how we were doing. And during our pilot phase, not so great, not what we were expecting. On September 1st, we did roll out the feature across all of our clients, not just on our pilot clients, and we came down into the threshold that we were expecting. And we weren't able to obviously reflect it in the slides, but I did check the report last night, and consistently since we launched, we've been at that 15, 16%. So we feel pretty good about the feature, so that's good. But what if we wanted to explore, maybe we saw a trend where it was coming back up, how could we gather some qualitative data? So if we wanted to, we could actually go into that next step now and use a poll within Pendo for when they did hit thumbs down to kind of gather that, what was wrong with the notes? From here, if we did implement this, we haven't, but we could then gather that information and then determine, is it really the note summary itself that's an issue? Or maybe they had a thumbs down because there was a usability issue. It wasn't where they thought it was going to be, or some other reason, right? We don't know, because we don't have that type of feedback. But we could, and that's what the beauty with Pendo is.
So in our next scenario, we're centered around improving workflows. Now, I know these are healthcare RCM specific workflows, but I'm sure everybody can relate to this. We're all trying to find ways to automate and make tasks faster. So obviously that is something we look at too. In RCM, there are some tasks that are very time consuming. So we will often kick off an initiative to figure out either how to automate or make that workflow better. However, when we do that, we need to establish a baseline on how long does it take currently to complete that task, because we need a baseline, a benchmark to compare against to know if we've succeeded or not. And so historically, we were using manual time studies. Now, as I'm sure all of you know, if you've done one of these, they're very unreliable. They rely on associates to log start and end times on a task, either in Excel or on a piece of paper. They typically use a small sample size. A lot of times it's top performers who are the ones who actually complete the time studies, which is obviously going to bias your data. So in this specific example, or I guess I should say, when we do those manual time studies, even though we know that they have errors and inconsistencies, we're still using those to validate our success, which was a problem for us because it's not the best benchmark. So before Julie talks about how we use Pendo to help us with this, we first went and talked to the product managers and said, how do you identify success and what should we be measuring? In this specific example, it was when our associates go to create a letter, or more specifically, we defined it as the time from when the associate clicks create letter to the time that finalized letter is uploaded into the system.
So we walked through, this is a product manager's first exposure to Pendo. So we really kind of stepped him back through and walked through a couple of different steps within Pendo before we kind of got to that answer of how long it takes. And the first thing we did was we built a workflow of what people did when they got to that page that create a letter's on. And you saw that it was a ton of information, a lot of different journeys occurring. And we realized that it was too big of a sample size, that it wasn't really her target segment that we were looking for. We had a lot of extraneous data on there. So we built a segment for it and we ran that workflow. That allowed us to make sure we were looking at the correct segment of users. From there, on our journeys, we then said, okay, they have to have taken these 3 steps, and that helped narrow, again, the number of journeys that were occurring. From that result, we actually identified one situation where a couple of different times, it wasn't just a one and done, that upload letter was occurring multiple times in one journey. And that's not something that should be occurring. So we have now an opportunity with our UX team to sit down with those individuals, understand why they were hitting upload. Was the system timing up, or were they just not following the workflow process that they had been provided? Our final step was to build a funnel, and with that, we have this view here, and we actually get to our timing of 40 minutes to complete those tasks. And that is it was on par for what they thought it was going to be, between 40 and 45 minutes, so now we have the hard data on it. And what's great about this is we're able to use this same reporting once we implement our solution, and we'll be able to have that comparison right off the bat. And we don't have to go through a secondary time study, et cetera, in order to validate the workflow. So in this case, we had the UX team informed on our outcomes as well, on uploading multiple times, and then it wasn't a burden on the operations team.
So we've talked about how our usability studies informed the actions that we took within Pendo. We've also talked about how Pendo helped direct us where maybe we needed to go digging. But we did want to bring up one other thing that we thought was interesting in some recent usability, recent usability studies. So we were in early UAT for a new module within one of our applications, and the product manager didn't think that a usability study was necessary. This module is simply about presenting data. We had set it up in a way you can see in a very simple grid format. We presented the data in columns. Everybody thought, what could be wrong with this? What could we possibly do to make this any easier than this view? However, every time I see this slide, I always think of the common saying in product management that says, my opinion, while interesting, is irrelevant. This is a great example of that. Because when we did the usability study, because the product manager, she was like, I'll still help you set up a usability study, like even though I don't think we need one. Let's do it. During the usability study, there was a view that had this drawer option, but it was only available on some accounts. It wasn't available across the entire module. And all of the users unanimously preferred this view. Since we were in early UAT, we were able to go back to our development team, and they were able to put this drawer view across the entire module. Now, this sounds so simple, but it's something that we would have missed if we didn't do that usability study. Again, we were in UAT. The product was doing what it intended to do. It was giving that data to our associates. But with the usability study, we were able to give them a view that made them a lot happier, and it was what they preferred. We were also able to give a more consistent experience across the module. So even on things that seem really simple and we think we know all the answers, trust me, I do that all the time, it's still great to validate and do those usability studies because you never know what you're going to find. And in this situation, it wasn't that hard for us because we were still in early UAT to go back and make this change and make our end users very happy. So now that we've walked through the ways in which we've used usability studies within Pendo, we want to talk through some of our lessons learned. This is a framework that we hope that you can use at your company, so we want to spare you from making the same mistakes that we did. The first is that usability studies are best done one-on-one. If you're like me as a product manager, you want to be as efficient as possible. So when somebody says you need to do 3 usability studies, what do? You set up one session with 3 people. But we found that the sessions were much better and our results were better if we did them one-on-one. And then we leveraged Pendo to go investigate those larger trends. That was an option we didn't have before Pendo. So it's really great to talk to people one-on-one and then go verify with the data that Pendo gives you. So that was our first lesson learned.
Another lesson learned is, if you can, have your funnel path or workflows defined before your usability study. We're all in a remote situation right now, so even though we're observing them, you're observing them through screen share, you may not capture everything that they clicked on or and you don't want to stop them in the flow to say, what did you just do? You want to let them continue. By having that already defined, then you would be able to validate that afterwards as well and not have to disrupt them during the study.
Our next lesson learned is that usability studies can be done at any point during the lifecycle process. They aren't just one and done. So I hope we've demonstrated today that while most people think they need to do usability studies before go live, it's really helpful to continue to do them throughout the process and leveraging Pendo to show you where you might need to go digging. So that was our other lesson learned, is that I think we had the mindset of usability studies are done in conjunction with UAT and then you're done. But like we found with some of our examples, there was still things that we could fix and make better for our end users in future releases.
And finally, Pendo and usability studies can work together to help inform you on quick wins from a tooltips or an onboarding guide, and that Pendo can also help inform you on areas you need to focus on from a usability perspective. And by leveraging both usability studies and Pendo analytics, you can create a robust feedback loop and continuously enhances your user experience, ensuring applications are intuitive and user-friendly. And as a final quote from one of our lead product managers, her first exposure to usability studies is she thought she's the expert, right? But she was very humbled, and more importantly, she was happy that with the outcome, she was able to provide that better user experience for her users, because that's what we're here as product for. So thank you, and we'll open it for Q&A.
Does that work? It looks like it does. Hi, thank you so much for the session. I was very interested in the first thing you shared, where you were asking users to rate, from very good to very bad experience. We're trying to do this as well on our site and correlate the response we're getting to interactions on the site to see whether we can see that certain interactions are leading to a bad or a good outcome. Is this something you've tried? And if so, what did you learn?
Did you get all the questions? So the question, you're talking about the rating scale,
Yes.
right? And then what was the second part of that?
So what we're trying to do is correlate the response on the rating scale, 1 to 5,
Okay.
to user interactions on the page and see whether certain interactions are leading to higher or lower ratings.
That's an interesting concept. We hadn't, I don't think, had taken that into account yet, as far as like taking their 4 or 5 and then actually seeing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
Great idea. Thank you for the suggestion, right?
Yes.
Yep,
All
that's
right,
something we'll
another
have to do.
question in the back. There's a mic behind you. There you go.
Hello. Okay. I was just wondering if you have used Pendo for usability testing recruitment, like identifying a certain segment that might be struggling and having them come in to do the usability testing, and if so, have you found success with that?
So the question, I don't know if everyone heard the question, is whether or not we've used Pendo to identify our candidates, if you will, our user subjects for the usability study. And we have not leveraged, and I should have said up front, we are still really early in our overall Pendo adoption overall. But this is where we've found success between leveraging both of them, but we will. So I anticipate with our example on the user flow and the 40 minutes is that as we get ready to start implementing some of our solutions for that, like selecting people from that based on what journey they're taking. So if it's the ones that were uploading the letter multiple times, like they would probably be good candidates then to sit in on that usability study. So I do see us leveraging that in the future.
We have
Excellent,
done
thank you.
some of the reverse, where we've looked at our power users, because we also want to understand that. Like our associate base is very wide, right? Like we have hospital systems across the country. They're working in different systems. And so things are very different for our associates. So we have created segments for power users to figure out, okay, you're doing this, you're doing it really well. Why? What was the path you took? And then how could we then create a guide or tips to then push to maybe our users who aren't having that level of success or with completing tasks to guide them in a way. So we've done the reverse, but we definitely need to do that, what you suggested as well.
Great question. Thank you so much. Another question right down here.
Hi, my name is Dave Nolan. I'm a UX lead for WriteWorks. So my question is, how did you capture or did you capture verbal or text feedback from the users within the context of the tests? And
Great
did you use
question.
Pendo to do that?
We did not. So we were actually using Miro to manage our usability study. So after the questions that we had the unanimous yes, unanimous no, there was also some additional questions on how they felt about certain things, and that was captured within that same Miro board. Yeah. Yeah. Figma, sorry. Wrong board.
What a fun little Pendo product shout out. We are capable of using Listen to gather all your customer feedback in one spot. Another question? One over here. Got it. Oh, there's a question. Oop, just kidding. She was excited and drawing an air diagram. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm curious about the first example you gave where you were talking people through performing routine tasks that they would need to do. I've found sometimes in usability studies that it's hard to get people to do certain things. So when you needed them to click to submit a payment, for example, how did you elicit that behavior without saying, like, click on the make a payment button? Or how did you put them in the mindset of needing to even pay that day?
Yeah, so it was probably might have been difficult to see, but we actually set the stage as far you're coming in today and you need to do X. And so the stage was set on the task that they were having to perform. It wasn't you must select send a payment. It's like you have to reconcile an account. So what is it you would do, which may end up in doing that task, but it was more about setting the stage on the objective of what they needed to accomplish.
May I just clarify, was it like a verbal introduction that you gave?
It was written on like we set it as a stage within Figma that said, here's your task, and we laid out and again, Cora's in the audience here. She will happy to talk to you all about this as well.
She has a pink wig on, she said.
Yeah, I think one other thing was this was a task. The end goal was something they were already doing. This was not a new workflow for them. They were just doing it in Excel worksheets, and we were moving them to an application. So when we said this task is for you to reconcile an account, our users know what that means. They were doing it just in a less efficient way. So we didn't have to guide them on like the actual ins and outs of the task. It was tasks that they were already doing. So that also helped because they knew what we were saying.
Great question. Any other questions? Yep, one down here. You're challenging our mic runners. I love it.
Getting her steps in today.
Yeah,
Make
she was
him go
getting
back
the
and
workout.
forth. It's fun.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. We're a relatively new Pendo customer as well. This may be more for the Pendo folks, but I'm wondering if there's a way you could set up usability study, use Orchestrate to email it to the target folks, then have some limited guides to give them instructions of what you're trying to test, and then be able to go watch the session replays to identify those
Here's my
pain points.
I think you could, right? The other part of the study is you're also asking how they feel, right? Like you're getting that feedback. It's not just about tracing where they clicked. It's also part of those questions in the end after they've finished all their tasks as far as like their experience, because you want to get that sentiment, not just the completion of the task. So.
Little plug though, we do have a wonderful product village outside that has a dedicated booth to Orchestrate who would love to walk you through exactly what you just talked through.
Yeah, I'm very excited about Orchestrate. To your question, we went and talked to them because today when we launch a new module, for the first 30 days, product owns the support of that module. Then it turns over to our support teams once everything is stable. So 30 days is just kind of a rough estimate. Today, that process means that we add hundreds of users to a Teams channel, and yours truly, or whoever the product manager is, has to sit there and answer questions. Now, some of the questions are very complicated. Yes, we need to talk about it. But we also get questions like, I can't access it, the tool. And we're messaging back, is your VPN on? Where we could use Orchestrate to identify those users or identify users who have not interacted with the module and provide further instruction. So while we haven't used it for usability studies, to your question, I'm really excited to figure out where we could use Orchestrate within our applications. I think there's a lot we could learn.
We are also very excited for Orchestrate. Other questions? We've got a couple more minutes. Going once. You guys just answered all their questions in your wonderful presentation. Let's give them a big round of applause, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.